Hey, friends, family, welcome to another edition of the Around the Coin podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Sargeant, and this one is a banger. We had such a heated discussion on LinkedIn talking about how AI is going to impact recruitment. We have on the show Adam Jackson, who's the co-founder and CEO of Braintrust, and they've now released a new product, Braintrust AIR, Braintrust AIR, which is an AI recruiter taking, 500 applicants, breaking it down to 93, having video interviews, contextual insights and questions, using thousands of data points and being regulatory compliant is a huge feat. And we go down the rabbit hole about the current existing recruitment plans, how AI is going to impact recruiters and make them better at doing the things they like to do, which is establishing relationships and subject matter expertise. We talk a little bit at the end about investing in business as a serial entrepreneur and what it's like in the current landscape with mass layoffs in tech. I know I always say it's a must listen to episode. If you're a candidate trying to get a job, or if you're a recruiter or a hiring manager, this is an absolutely fascinating episode. I hope you all enjoy it. This is Stephen Sargeant, host of Around the Coin podcast. We have Adam Jackson, who's the co-founder and CEO of Braintrust. Adam, the conversation around AI recruiters has absolutely sparked a heated debate on places like LinkedIn and Twitter. Why don't you give a brief introduction to yourself, and then we're just going to dive in, because I know there's a lot of things that people want you to answer, a lot of questions that they have coming to you. So tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Stephen. It's fun to be here and chat about this. So I'm Adam Jackson. I'm co-founder at Braintrust. Braintrust is a global talent marketplace that connects mostly tech workers, developers, designers, product managers, but also marketers and writers and video editors with companies that need their services, either on a short-term contract, long-term contract, or full-time. It doesn't matter. What that concept is not new. What makes Braintrust unique is that it is owned and controlled by the talent that make their living on the network. Why does that matter? Well, most job recruiting companies or staffing firms or even marketplaces for talent are for-profit entities that their job is to extract as much value from that transaction of matching talent and clients as possible. And that markup could be 25, 30%. It could be 50 to 100% if you're talking about the big consulting firms. And so, that's a lot of value extraction just for making a match. And so we came up with Braintrust with the goal of taking that value that's being extracted and giving it back to the talent. So the way Braintrust works is you can create a profile, set your hourly rate, or bid on a job with an hourly or monthly or annual rate, whatever you want, and you're going to get that rate. And then the client will pay a 15% flat fee on top of that. So the 15% goes to, fund the organization, basically buys Braintrust tokens, which is our native token that powers the network, buys them out of the open market and puts them back into treasury so we can keep recycling them. And so what do you get at the end? You get clients get pre-vetted, really great talent. They get matched. They post a job and they get matched very quickly, hours or days instead of weeks. And then we got all this AI stuff we'll talk about that makes that even faster. And their money's going further, right? So not paying a 50% or 75% markup for the talent. They're paying a flat 15%. So the economics are better for both sides. And so those superior economics end up bringing better talent to Braintrust. We're just crossed 800,000 talent members. We'll be at 1 million next month, all vetted and screened and whatever. And then thousands of clients posting jobs every day for those folks. So that's
I'm curious, recruitment, and I did a little recruitment back in my heyday. Recruitment has always been an area for disruption, but it never seemed to be disrupted, right? People just put on fancy words across recruitment labels, right? Like, I'm the crypto recruiter, I'm the CFO recruiter, but they never really disrupted like it should, because I think the recruitment process is very similar to probably buying a used car, right? Nobody comes back and says, oh, that was such a good purchase. I had so much customer service. I had absolutely no problems. But similar to the car sales, we haven't seen there be much disruption. Were you surprised by kind of people are having the same challenges in recruitment now that they've had for the last 20 to 30 years?
look, there's been no innovation in this space, right? Like you have these big job boards like Indeed or LinkedIn, and they're just spam machines. It's just you're spamming resumes. If you're on the other end, like this sucks for both sides. Think about it. As a applicant, we've all applied for jobs. Like it's such a hopeless feeling to just apply, never hear back. Or if you do hear back, you get a screening call, never hear back. Right? It's hopeless. And look, on the recruiting hiring side, I've hired thousands of people over my career. It's just as hopeless. You're like, you post a job, you're looking at 400 or 500 applicants in 24, 48 hours. Like, how the hell am I supposed to get through all this? So nothing has innovated on this topic. And this is something I'm very passionate about. And so we've been building this, what we call Braintrust AIR, AI Recruiter, that we launched Monday here, April 29th, 2024. We launched this package to make that awful process better for both sides. This isn't about replacing job recruiters. It's not about, destroying their jobs or whatever. It's about making them better and more effective, and taking a lot of what AI is great at is taking a lot of the really boring, repetitive tasks that humans frankly don't like and shouldn't be doing, and having an AI do them.
Tell me, what are some of the tasks that it takes away? Because I think I know, and you probably know, and maybe a lot of listeners know, but maybe not everyone knows. Like, hey, what are some of the things that ties up most of the recruiters' time and doesn't give them time to provide useful feedback, or to communicate more often, or to ensure that there's an aftercare program where they're following up with their recently hired candidates. That, like, these are all things that are completely missing, which I think makes what would make a beautiful recruitment process. So maybe you could tell me some of the things that are completely destroying their time.
Yeah, I'll walk through exactly how Braintrust AIR works, and it will answer the exact question you're asking. Okay, so let's start. So hiring manager comes to Braintrust, starts typing in the role they need. Like, I need a UX UX designer for mobile app. Braintrust AIR generates the full job description for them. It takes 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever, down to 10 seconds. You can edit it if you want to, hit post. It then posts out to Braintrust job board and a bunch of other job boards too. And it will also ping people it thinks are good matches who are already employed. Because obviously, like, just because someone's looking for work doesn't mean that they're the best match, right? So it does all that stuff.
I'm going to interrupt you a lot because I want to make sure that me and the audience understands those people are already in the Braintrust ecosystem, and that's how they know they're employed, and to send them a message because they see that there's kind of an AI match there with certain job skills. And to your point, I think that, creating, everyone might say like, oh, job descriptions, AI creation. Most of the recruiters, most of the hiring managers are just copying and pasting job descriptions that they see on other job posts or that have been used since 1996 within their own organization. They're probably outdated.
And that doesn't yield the best candidates, right? Recycling a Java developer for descriptions that Oracle posted 20 years ago. So it creates a unique one based on what it knows about your needs and the company you work for, that kind of stuff. Okay, then that's not the cool part. Okay, the applications then start flooding in. Right, we've all been on the other end of the barrel of this gun. It's 400, 500, 600 applicants, just buzz, and you're like, as a hiring manager, you're just like, okay, well, I'm gonna start looking at these and like thumbs up. The first 10 I think look reasonable. And like, sorry, other 490, you're not getting a shot at this, right? And like that's not a knock on job recruitment. I'm guilty of this every week.
You have to.
It's human nature, right? We have a lot to do. We're not going to look at all 500. But what sucks about that is the best one could be number 397 or 504. Or whatever. The best one's probably not in the top 10, right? And so,
would you agree that 90% of those applicants or candidates really aren't suited for the job, and they're just kind of like auto-replying or auto-applying just to shoot their shot, right?
Yeah, they're
spamming. Would you agree that there's about 90%? Or what percentage would you give to the people that no business even applying for the job?
Yeah, it depends on the role. The lower the skill level, the higher the percentage of unqualified people will apply. And then the higher the skill level. Yeah, so Braintrust is kind of an enterprise talent network. So it's like people with 3+ years experience at development, product managers, technical people, security, blockchain, all that kind of stuff. It's a big field, right? And so I would say, look, it's more than half are not great applicants, right? So then what happens is, so the Braintrust AIR actually takes the time to look at every single application and measure it in the way they answered the screening questions and that kind of stuff, measure it against the actual requirements for the job. So off the bat, we're looking at everybody. And so that's going to get you a better candidate as a hiring manager, and it levels the playing field as an applicant. It's like, oh, you have a shot. Whereas before this, you had no shot unless, you were lucky enough to be near the top of the pile. And so so it sifts through all, let's say, 500 applicants, and it comes back and says, you know what, 90 of these people look like they could be a good fit. And then what it does is it goes and schedules a live video interview with all 90 of those people, and then conducts the video interview for you. It actually will set up a live video chat, just like you and I are doing right now. And it has a bunch of questions preloaded for that role. So, and you can add some if you want, but so let's say it's UX designer. It's like, there's 18 or 20 questions, and it digs. This is conversational AI. Braintrust AIR will have a conversation, like, tell me about the last big design project you did. Okay, what were the tools you used to build it? How'd you do user research? Oh, that's interesting. Why'd you choose that tool? Or you only talked to 20 users? Like, why not more? I mean, it gets into it, right? It's because it's an LLM.
It's going to be based on the responses of the actual candidate. So if I said, hey, I worked at Google, like something that might not have been in my resume, but I say, hey, I was working at Google, and during the time of this downsizing, I really carried the team on my back. Is it going to pick up on that and say, well, tell me something about leadership and what you learned during such a trying time? It's going to be able to kind of pick up those nuances during
exactly right. We've spent the last year and a half building this thing to do exactly what great human recruiters do, and it's exactly what you just said. And so then it has those 90 phone interviews all in parallel for video interviews, right? And then the next day, it hands the best 5 or best 10 or however many you want back to the hiring manager. And so we're talking about, first of all, tasks that aren't being done today, right? You don't look at 500 applications and you don't do 90 phone screens, right? You might look at 10 and have 2. It did a much better, bigger job, and frankly, very boring work that no one really wants to be doing anyway. It crunches, 6 weeks of this nonsense down to about 2 days and hands the hiring manager, recruiter, whoever, the best 5. Then the human takes over, right? And then you can do the second screen. But now you're talking to 5 very well vetted people that aren't wasting your time because the AI sifted through all that for you. And so this isn't about replacing recruiters, right? Like, I would never hire someone that only an AI spoke to. That's freaking crazy, right? Like, but this thing, it boils the ocean for you. And I'm feeling really good now about these 5 conversations I'm going to have, and I'm going to make a hire with one of them or more, right?
I love it. Some of the pushback we got from the LinkedIn was like, yeah, but they don't have the relationship skills that recruiters do. They can't really, those certain skills that actual human recruiter could pick up during the conversation, or maybe even red flags that they could pick up during the conversation. What do you say when people say, yeah, I'd rather have a human in that position? Or are you saying, like, basically, hey, the human comes in after we kind of narrow down the field, so now they can really zero in on those human, EQ level stuff that most recruiters are able to pick up on?
Totally agree. Look, AIs don't have it, not yet anyway. Ours sure doesn't. But let's talk about red flags for a second. Like, there are red flags that can be picked up. Like if someone won't answer your question, right? Like they're kind of BSing you a little bit, and they're like, well, I mean, this thing is, AIR is actually trained to like get you to answer that question. And if you don't, it will make a note that you did not answer that question. And by the way, the human who gets the results back they look at the scorecard and they can drill in and watch the interview or watch clips. Like, the AI will flag when something notable is said, or there's a red flag, it probably won't make the cut. And that, but I agree, like a company shouldn't be hiring people that no one's ever met, right? We're not there. And then I want to talk about the applicant side for a second. Like,
you touched on that report card and almost instant feedback, which is something that I think every recruiter is guilty of not providing.
Yeah. Look, I empathize with, I don't, as someone who's hired lots of people, I don't always okay, maybe I never have given feedback to someone I didn't hire because I don't have time, right? People don't have time for that stuff. And so it's disheartening as someone who, applies and applies and applies. And, it's a demoralizing experience. And I've been there and everyone's been there. And so what we built AIR to do is give you feedback at the end and show you the scorecard, right? Be like, hey, here's what it is, right? And if you want to improve, here's some ways you can improve. It will also give you some coaching. So so let's say you just want coaching, you're not interviewing for the job. You can have a session with this thing and it will give you feedback in real time. Like, hey, your lighting's not very good, or you should stop looking away from the camera. Is that soft stuff? And then hard skills, like, hey, like I see you have, a bunch of experience with XYZ skill, but most UX designers who are getting jobs on Braintrust have, expert in Webflow or Figma or whatever the tool is, right? And like, we don't see that on your profile. Why don't you go learn that? That's good career coaching, right? And so the AI is built to do that.
Now you're coming after my job because I provide one-on-one coaching for people that want to get into crypto from like a compliance angle, but it's exactly those small points. And the reason why I'm able to provide that coaching is because nobody's telling them. Nobody's telling them that their audio is poor and that the camera angles are pointing upwards to their nostrils. And that when I say, tell me about yourself, they're kind of just giving me, the summary of their resume versus kind of showing me some of the skills that they picked up over the years. And I think this is why I do this, is because I don't think a lot of people are getting that crucial feedback. And I think I love the fact that you can just kind of jump on it as a candidate and kind of, go through this skill test, almost like a skill testing question. People aren't getting the reps either. People aren't having a lot of interviews or getting a lot of interviews. So they really don't know like what they're doing wrong, especially when they're getting 4 or 5 interviews in 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And look, this thing doesn't replace career coaches either. It's just a basic first tool, right? I mean, I don't think the nuanced detail of coaching you're providing really can be done by AI, but we're talking about some basic stuff like the aesthetics, but also like, hey, like something you just said, I don't think an AI would do. Like, you're just listing skills. Why don't you tell me stories, right? Like that's interesting feedback. Like, I don't know. It's such an underserved part of the economy right now, like helping talent. People want to improve themselves, and there's just no good way to do it right now.
I love it. And talk to me about this. I know since COVID, since the pandemic, even myself have hired people overseas. We're seeing a lot more of that kind of remote work, hiring people overseas, cheaper, to your point, cheaper, maybe recruitment fees or even cheaper labor. Talk to me about this kind of like future of work movement that you're seeing, that you've seen some trends, especially as we have a lot of people in the tech sector that are listening to this. What are some trends that you're seeing from the future of work or the existing situation?
Sure. Well, I mean, COVID, we launched Braintrust in March of 2020, if you can believe that. And we were pitching it as a remote first, get better people who aren't just in the Bay Area or New York. And before COVID, everyone was kind of like, yeah, we'll see. But we kind of want you to come to the office, which we all know is BS, right? I mean, my last company, Doctor On Demand, we're the world's largest or country's largest video telemedicine service. And it's like you can see a doctor over your iPhone, and people thought we were crazy. And then COVID taught everybody that's probably a good idea. So same thing with Braintrust. We were like, I have this weird through line in my career of like remote stuff, but Braintrust itself is a remote network, decentralized, people all over the world. Most of them I've never met. We don't have offices. And so COVID made no offices the law. And then fast forward, they had this like, return to office head fake where frankly, lazy managers were like, I'm not very good at managing, so I'll determine that you've done your job because I can see you sitting in your cubicle. Just total nonsense, right? And so,
or that lease is 7 more years. That lease is a 10-year lease, and we've only gone through 3 years of COVID. Like, somebody's gonna have to come sit in these seats, or I lose my job.
Their sunk cost fallacy in full effect there. So look, we all know that knowledge, the bulk of knowledge work can be done just as well or better remotely. It gives people time back in their schedule. They can be with their family, do pickup. I have 3 kids. I would never go back to commuting. I live in the Bay Area. Traffic sucks here. Like, I don't want to sit on the freeway. Like, it's just better. Okay. It just is. And that we still get together in person sometimes. Of course, you got to whiteboard stuff out. You got to team build. I'm not saying never see anybody, but going to an office 3, 4, 5 days a week is an anachronism. We all know that's true. Okay. So, I'm sorry, I got off to, I can't get on these tangents.
No, I think this is what everyone's feeling right now. I think this is one of the biggest struggles that companies are having. Like, how do you bring in top talent, but this top talent, similar to yourself, doesn't want to come into the office, and designated 2 to 3 days a week. So, like, what are your suggestions? I think that was going to be one of my questions, is like, what do you suggest these companies do to obtain top talent, but still, keep that flexibility that top talent is? Those are deal breakers nowadays. If you have children, pets, elderly parents, like, these are deal breakers, having to come into the office 2, 3 times a week.
So look, we've been coaching our clients since 2020, and they've really come around, right? Corporate America, there's still some holdouts here and there, but like Goldman Sachs, they have to come to the office. Fine. But actually, Goldman uses Braintrust for plenty of remote stuff. But with the clients have really come around to the notion that, and here's the pitch. And like, I firmly believe this and run my own company on this principle. So we're dogfooding this. Is like, when you open your roles up to fully remote and anywhere in the world, minus the sanctioned countries, obviously, like, you're leveling the playing field. You're going to get better talent at a more competitive rate. And like, that's just better. And now the problem becomes, this is why we came up with AIR. The problem becomes, you post a senior Java developer remote role, you're going to get 1,000 applications. You just are, right? That's the meat and potatoes that runs the economy. And so, you're kind of like, okay, back to the problem we just outlined, right? So AIR was built to solve that problem, to let the whole world can apply, and does. And AIR will screen every one of those people who should be screened. And then in 2 days, we're going to hand you the best 5, right? And so
do you feel companies are even hedging now, and that they're less likely to put remote because of that exact problem? Maybe like, shooting themselves in the foot because they're not getting access to that global marketplace because they just don't want to deal with the extra applicants.
That's why we built AIR, is to answer that question. We tell people, if you put a location mandate, you're by default shooting yourself in the foot. We have a big company in St. Louis that has an office there. It's like, nobody lives there, man. They just don't. Like, the person who is going to be best for your job, I can guarantee you, does not live in St. Louis. Nothing against St. Louis, but
you have the whole of Missouri, like, ready to unsubscribe from the podcast.
Like, I'm from Cleveland, okay, and it's I get the Midwestern thing, but just hampering yourself with a location mandate, it's just going to have suboptimal results.
You talked about Goldman Sachs. A lot of people listen to this podcast saying that this is perfect for tech, but this won't work in my industry because ABC. Tell me about some of your customers. Tell me about some of the industries that maybe you see trending within the platform. And tell me some other like maybe some other departments, like, I'm in compliance. Cybersecurity is becoming more and more important, especially in the tech area. Kind of cover the gambit of your customers and some emerging niches within the platform that you're seeing.
Sure. Yeah. A couple points here. So Braintrust has clients in every sector of the economy. So consumer goods, Nestle, Nike, tech, Airbnb, Google, Meta, banking, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, a bunch of others, energy, Coke Industries. So every sector of the economy uses companies use Braintrust for tech hiring today. We've recently expanded into marketing, which is very tech adjacent. And then we'll get into, by the end of the year, we'll be in all knowledge worker fields. So think about accountants, paralegals, compliance professionals, and Braintrust AIR will be trained to help screen folks in all of those roles. We'll be beyond tech by the end of the year.
One of the things that you mentioned, I think you even posted on LinkedIn, is that jobs of people being able to, help train the AI. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Is that creating a new niche of employment where people are like, hey, I can just train a bunch of different AIs on my subject matter expertise? Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Braintrust AIR was trained on thousands and thousands of hours of recorded video. And then our recruiters, our in-house recruiters, training the AI on this is good, this is where you need to follow up. It's complicated, right? And so, yeah, we employ recruiters to help us do that. And then look, recruiters still need to do the final steps of the screen, right? But what AIR does is it frees up all that huge chunk of time spent on mindlessly screening or, for screens or combing through countless resumes, and lets recruiters go back to what they're good at: building company culture, making sure onboarding goes well, making sure people, have a buddy system or whatever when they start, so they feel taken care of. That's like, to me, this role is more important in the remote world than it ever was in the physical world. Like if you go to an office, a lot of people listening, probably young people, have never been to an office, right? I mean, it's just, but when, us older guys, like when you enter an office, you start a new job, you're going to meet someone at the water cooler. You're going to have lunch with someone. Like your manager is probably going to be your buddy. Like it wasn't as scary. Think about getting a job from your desk in your home, and you've never met any of these people in person, and you probably never will. Like that could be lonely and scary. That's a recruiter's job, is to help make that less scary. AI is not going to do that, right? So that to me, that's like, it's not that we're creating new jobs necessarily. Is we're making the existing folks who do HR professionals, recruiters, more effective, and like let them like lean in on their uniquely human skills and let the repetitive stuff get done by the robots.
Yeah, it's like any supplement. Like, I hate using the steroid example, but like I could use steroids all day, but if I'm eating crap food or not going to the gym, I'm not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. But if I am working out and I am doing the things I'm supposed to do, similar to how recruiters doing the job, this is just going to make me like, this is a superpower. So now I have more time to do the things that really make or break some even candidates wanting to apply to these clients in the first place. A lot of clients don't get the top talent because the recruitment process is 5 to 6 interviews. You have to meet the company dog and everybody else. It's a month-long process. And by that time, those candidates have already gone to other companies because they've had more of a streamlined and seamless process.
That's right.
What are your thoughts on regulation? Because you mentioned, now we're talking about global positions. We're talking about things in the US where I think in the US, you can't ask a candidate what their salary expectations are. You're dealing with GDPR in Europe. How does your platform kind of balance all of these nuances when it comes to regulations and things like privacy? You mentioned Meta. I know a lot of people like, seize up about, well, what are you doing with all this data? And what are you doing with my interviews? Are you using this to now train your AI and using me for free? I think these are all going to be questions from people that are very skeptical when it comes to AI.
Yeah, look, I mean, all those regulations you just mentioned have nothing to do with AI, right? Those are employment laws that we comply with globally. That's just table stakes. There's something interesting that just happened in New York where I think it's not just the state, the city said, any company headquartered here who's using AI at any part of their recruiting process needs to publish that on their careers page, that A, that they're using AI, and B, how they're using it. So that was actually pretty thoughtful regulation. It's like, we're not telling you not to do it. We're just telling you, be transparent about how you're using it. Right. And I think, look, bias is the hot topic here. Right. And, I've been talking about this all week. We built AIR to specifically, deliberately not be biased. It is designed to not look at age, location, accent, ethnicity, gender, things that humans are consciously or unconsciously doing it all the time, right? And so the computers are just going to be better than this and better than humans at this aspect. And so I think there's a very strong kind of DEI and diversity component to this that, look, I don't have data yet. This product just launched on Monday, but I look forward to taking a look at it, and I think we're going to do better.
But if the inputs are coming from human beings, and this was some of the discussion we had in the LinkedIn post, if the input's coming from human beings and human beings have bias, how can the AI kind of separate that bias, or at least spread that risk of bias across the way, so that there isn't, like, you're not just feeding bias into a system that's just going to like hyperbole, like make it more biased just because it's receiving
self-reinforce its own bias. So exactly. This is a great topic. There's two different ways you think about training these things. The first one would be like let's I'll just say Google. I'm not sure that they have done this or do that. Someone told me they've done this, and I don't know it's true, but Google was like, hey, let's like reverse engineer everyone who's worked here in the last 20 years who's been great and worked out, and then go find more people like that. Well, that's a fucking bias machine if I've ever seen one. Right? Like, I mean, talk about reinforcing a monoculture, right? And look, I don't want to pick on Google. I'm not sure that that story is true, but it could be any company, right? Any company
across the board that has that kind of vibe.
Totally, right. And I happen to know Google takes DEI very seriously, and they're been a great partner of ours, and they're a great client on Braintrust. So not picking on anybody. But if you do that, people have done what I just described, and that is a surefire way to reinforce all the bias that you've had the last 20 years moving forward. With Braintrust AIR, you're starting over, right? We built a super objective skill assessment engine, conversational, that can assess not just your hard skills, but like how you solve problems, how you think about things, what your preferences are. And we built it from scratch, and now we have every qualified person able to go through it, right? It's blank slate, right? And it's not like there's no bias in it because it was not trained that way. So that we think it's going to be a far superior tool for eliminating bias in organizations.
What about companies like Google that are saying, hey, we want to be more diverse, we want more diversity? Is there a button that they can press to like maybe, flood a little bit more diversity? Or do you think by just leveling the playing field, they're naturally going to see those candidates that they might not have seen, and you're just going to naturally have that diverse, equity and inclusion that you've been yearning for without having to do anything manually?
The latter, absolutely the latter. And look, I'm biased in my optimism about this, but I just from my own experience, like I've hired thousands of developers and designers in my 20-year career for venture-backed companies, and it's always looked like a real mixed bag. It's been about half female, half male. Plenty of ethnic diversity because we're always remote, right? It turns out like right. if the job allows anyone in the world, as long as you're willing to like work on our time zone for a couple hours, right, to apply, then it's going to look like some cross section of the world, right? And you'll have little bubbles up here, there, like Eastern Europe, the Balkan states have really focused on technical skills over the last 20 years, right. So. You see there's like an outsized, Ukrainian, Romanian, whatever. And Sub-Saharan Africa has like just these incredible developers that, just in the last 10 years that have, like, Nigeria is this amazing. So you see them kind of outsized, but like it's based on the whole world, right? It's not just an American thing anymore. So I don't think you'll need, to answer your question, we do not have a button that says more diversity. We're really in trouble for that. But you don't need one. You don't need that button. Like, the world is a diverse place. And so when you level the playing field on applicants and look at every single one of them, you're just going to end up with a more diverse workforce. And when I say diverse too, like, I don't just mean ethnic and gender. Like there is the economy should be meritocratic too, right? And so, people who are very good and very hungry and very motivated from developing parts of the world, that's who I like to employ, right? Like, they have a lower sense of entitlement. They want the thing better, the more. They're going to be more, they're going to work harder, right? And like, that's what you want as a hiring manager. So this thing will help you find them easier.
You're talking about having over 1 million members within this platform and community that are, I'm assuming, mostly looking for jobs. Does that turn out to be like LinkedIn, where they're there, but once they get a job, they're not logging into LinkedIn anymore? Like, how do you measure activity, contribution? Are you keeping that data, or do you have people there in the community engaging people, having maybe, frequently asked question Fridays where they're answering questions from the community? How do you manage the community? Because I think that's probably AI can solve a lot of things. Managing a community and engaging a community is something that's still really hard to do with or without AI.
Certainly. Yeah. So we started off life as a jobs marketplace. You come, you build your profile, you get a job, bye-bye. And then last year we rolled out our professional network. And so now it's about giving and getting career advice peer to peer. And so folks like you could come on and build a cohort, and that's where our token comes in. This is about to launch. People can pay for bespoke career advice with the Braintrust token. And by the way, the way you get the token is you refer people, clients or talent. We want you can go buy the token on Coinbase, but we prefer you refer and earn it, because referring grows the network, right? And the majority of the growth of Braintrust is due to referrals. We have community people, the talent refer other talent. We have these connectors who are basically like freelance salespeople who refer clients in. So referrals, community, it's what drives Braintrust. Where AI comes in on that is moderation. So we used to pay a bunch of moderators to like sort things out or whatever. Turns out AI is pretty good at that. It's not completely replaced that role, but you want your professional community to be a safe and respectful place and not have people harassing or spamming or whatever. So we have AI moderators that kind of cut down on the spam. But yeah, so now it's come for the job, stay for the advice or giving it. Right? We have just as many people who want to give advice as receive it. So that's been a fun. We used to have our community on Discord, and like,
right.
Man, that's
which is a scary place. Which is a great community place. Scary place to access any links, information, or click a button.
We shut it off. It was just like, you know what? I get why some crypto people like it, and I'm a crypto guy. I get it, but like, it's not a safe place to have a professional network. So we built our own.
Speaking of crypto, you're tokenizing this. Everyone's gonna say like, why can't you just create this platform? You have a bunch of tech people in your industry. Couldn't you just create this platform in Web 2? What was the need for, the Web 3 application, the governance of bringing in the community and having this token and, people being able to earn the token and use the token for a number of different things? Bring me into why this is important on the blockchain.
That's right. Yeah. So look, there's plenty of Web 2 aspects to this. I never, Web 3 doesn't mean you can't use Web 2, right? That's they started saying Web 2.5 or something. But right. The point of the token is to provide an incentive mechanism for people to grow the network and a governance system. So we have a governance based on compound finance, Governor Alpha. We just forked that. It's one token, one vote. The rules to the marketplace, important rules like what fee should be charged to clients, is written into smart contract. It can only be updated by the community proposing and voting. Actually, the fee changed recently. Last summer, it went from 10 to 15%. Community proposed it, voted on it, it passed. Smart contract. Compare that. So it's a user-owned network, right? That's the point of Web3, is to give the value of a marketplace back to the users so they can make more money and have control over the place they make a living. We compare that to like DoorDash. Like DoorDash, like all the props in the world, they built an incredible business there, but like look at some of the shit that they pulled. They rolled out a tipping feature a couple of years ago where you could tip the Dasher, and then they took it, they booked it all as revenue. This is a great New York Times story about it. Could you do that in a user-owned network? Right? Yeah. Of course not, right? What if the Dashers had any say over how that or the restaurants had any say over how that marketplace works? Well, that DoorDash wouldn't be marking the food up 30% and then squashing down the DoorDasher, the driver's rates, right? And having this big public company, shareholders reap all the profits. It's a cool business, great. It's not good for restaurants, and it's sure not good for the Dashers. It's good for the diners if they're willing to pay for it. But I don't know. I just think that's a broken model. I think user-owned networks will grow faster and be more valuable over time than corporate-owned networks. That doesn't mean every single corporation is going to tokenize. Of course not. It's companies that are running marketplaces that extract more value than they provide. DoorDash and Uber, I think, are great examples of companies that extract more value than they're providing.
Right.
On the other end of the spectrum, you have like Airbnb, which connects, homeowners and whatever with people who want to stay there. Airbnb, I think this fee is 25 or 30%. They provide a lot for that fee. You get insurance, background checks, safe payments, check-in, check-out. You can feel good about having a stranger in your house because Airbnb's vetted them, blah, blah, blah. It's, all that reputation lives on. Like, you don't see people trying to disintermediate Airbnb. They're providing more value than they're extracting, which I think makes that a brilliant service. And so Braintrust came in and it was like, look, we think staffing firms and consulting firms that mark up talent 50 to 100% for making an introduction or vetting someone for an hour, we think that's extracting more value than they provide. So screw that. Let's have a user-owned network.
And why wouldn't a company say like, hey, I'm paying less a fee. I have a thriving community, because a lot of places, like, you don't have that community aspect. You would want to post a job in a place where people are seeking, how to upgrade their professional lives and be better candidates and get better jobs. What is the reason that you hear clients saying like, oh, I don't really think this is the place for me. I prefer my headhunter, or, a subject matter expert, or, I like saying that I'm a client of Deloitte or a big consultancy firm. What's maybe the number one reason that you're hearing why clients are a little bit hesitant to get into this platform?
Well, we don't see, once a client hears about us and sees how it works, they're in, right? We don't get any pushback. And we also don't we actually work with the Deloittes. McKinsey's like a big client on Braintrust. Like McKinsey will come in to a big company and be like, hey, we have to solve this massive supply chain issue, say. Like, right. Okay, we're going to need 50 developers to do it. Then McKinsey goes on Braintrust and finds the developers. So we're actually a vendor to a lot of those guys. And you can imagine, like, they're not in the business of renting out Java developers at 100% markup anymore because of us, right? But that doesn't mean that they don't have a place. And then on the headhunter topic, it's an important one. Like, headhunters are always going to exist for some roles. You're like, right. Braintrust is great for kind of just, good knowledge working jobs, developers, programmers, and eventually accountants and paralegals or whatever. But, the higher levels, the C-level stuff or senior VPs, like, you're always going to have specialized headhunters for that stuff.
Does Braintrust also provide scorecards for the client? Like, hey, this is the way
it's for both. Oh yeah, both sides see it. Absolutely, yeah. Awesome. After AIR does those 90 phone screens or video screens in parallel, it hands back the best 10 scorecards. You could see them all if you want to, but it's the scorecards for both sides.
What I meant by that is I figured that they would get the candidate scorecard, but had to be a better client. Because I think one of the issues we see in recruitment is not just the recruiters. The clients are very vague. They don't want to say exactly what they want because maybe they want the recruiter to give the information over the candidate. Is there an area where hiring managers can actually get better to kind of feed this process even more, not just the candidates getting better?
That's a great question. I mean, the first crack at that and making clients better is we take over writing the job description, right? Like because we know what works, right? We have this database of millions and millions and millions of job descriptions that we know what's effective. So we'll be prescriptive to the client on that stuff. And at the end of the day, the client's going to do whatever they want, right? But yeah, there is a feedback loop there for sure.
And what feedback are you getting from these clients? Or they just continue using the service? Like you land the client, everyone's happy. The client didn't have to pay out as much. The candidate got more on their salary because the client didn't have to nickel and dime them because they were paying a 40% recruitment fee. What is the feedback that you're getting on the other side? Or like, hey, these are the product upgrades that we need. I know your product team's probably busy handling all the feature requests. So what are some of the things that either clients or candidates are asking for?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to screen more people more objectively, more quickly was the biggest thing we've been hearing. That's why I spent the last year and a half investing and building in Braintrust AIR. The clients, the way this Braintrust spreads through a company usually is like one hiring manager will try it for a couple of roles, see how it goes, and then it'll kind of spread organically through the organization. We have a small sales team internally that helps expand these big clients. I mean, imagine how many brands are under Nestle, and how we've spread. They were one of our first clients, and now we're in almost every department and brand there. But yeah, look, they have to have a good experience. They have to find good people, and then that's how the accounts expand.
And if I'm a recruitment company, I could actually use you, find the candidates, and then maybe charge a premium for having to do the secondary reviews, interviews, et cetera. Is that when you're saying that other recruiters are using your consultancies? Would that be kind of the business model that they're going? They're using you to do the quick screening, and then they kind of narrow down their expertise for the remainder of the process?
Exactly right.
That's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, oh, as a recruiter, I would love to, use you to screen, because I think it's a waste of recruiters' time to have to even look at the majority of the applications. And then you're getting. But what about the ATS system? Because people had a beef with the ATS system. I believe it's the ATS system. They kind of like, used maybe automation to kind of go through some of the resumes. People felt they were discriminated against. Some of the comments were like, hey, I never get passed into the first round anyway because these systems don't work. What are your thoughts on the ATS system?
Yeah, look, so I'm not an expert on ATS systems. We integrate with them. Any ATS in the world, you can come as a client, create a Braintrust account, and then hook in your ATS with one click, and we pull all your jobs in by API, and then we can start vetting for you, right? So it's plug and play. On the topic of ATS screening or sorting and scoring resumes, look, it's a black box, right? You just don't know how it works. Braintrust provides scorecards. Like if you want to know why someone didn't make it, we'll tell you exactly why, right? And if you disagree with it, fine. If they can call the guy, that's fine. But it's about transparency.
Do you see this expanding into other areas like grants, scholarships? Because I can see a place where there's a lot of applications, very specific requirements. And I applied for a grant the other day, and they're like, "Hey, 60 days, we'll respond to you." 120 days later, they're like, "Hey, we're backed up." Obviously, everyone wants money from the government. What are your thoughts about expanding into these other areas?
That's a great point. It actually has never occurred to me. It's such a good idea. Look, the commercial job market is the biggest market in the world. Yeah. So if we can make an impact here, I think that's where we stay focused. I sure would like to see technology like this used at college admissions.
Right.
Speaking
that was my next thought.
I was thinking of a stinking hot topic.
Although there might be some, celebrities that might not enjoy this leveling the playing field very much.
You can't bribe an AI.
Yeah, they might be able to figure out you're not on the rowing team, and because they've never seen you with a paddle before. You were on Schwab Network discussing the March job report, March of 2024, about a month and a half before we recorded this podcast. And you started your company in 2020, March of 2020. The big thing is you're in the tech sector, and the tech sector has had mass layoffs. What are your thoughts on the mass layoffs? How does that impact your company? Are you seeing a turnaround? What are companies do? Are they more inclined to use your services now that, hey, they still need to hire, but they can't afford, they're trying to trim down all of their costs across the board. Recruitment might be the best place, especially when they're not hiring 500, 400 people at a time.
Yeah. So, and I'll be on Schwab again tomorrow for talk about the April jobs report. So,
give us some insight. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, no, I sure. I don't know what the jobs report's going to say, but I do know what the trend is. I mean, so Braintrust sits on the kind of the bleeding edge of this thing. We see the macroeconomic environment affecting the employment market in real time, and the layoffs have been terrible. It's just really good people who are smart and productive and deserving of a good job are being laid off in droves, and it's not over. You see this drip, 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 drip. It's not over. We're going to see more. Companies they overhired right through the ZERP bubble. Now they're paying the price. We heard from a senior executive at a very large public company that uses Braintrust that there's a mandate to reduce something like 250 million man hours this year. And so how do you do that? Well, you slow down hiring, you do layoffs, and you implement AI. And so it's this mixture of things that is just the water is choppy still in this labor market. So look, it remains to be seen if the Fed can do this soft landing. We thought we were going to see 3 rate cuts this year. Not going to happen. We might see a rate increase this summer, right? Which is pulling us more back toward probability of recession. And so it's very hard for big companies to plan around this uncertainty. And it's an election year, obviously, so everything's always upside down. So, we'll get through it. My advice, being an advocate for talent, and we're a talent-owned network here, is make AI your friend. Figure out how to use it, because I guarantee you the person hiring you doesn't know how to use it, right? Unless they're using Braintrust AIR, maybe that. But like no every role, yeah. I'm a plug machine here. Every role is going to be affected by AI. It doesn't matter what you do. I filed a patent recently, and my attorney is like, I'm an AI patent attorney. Like we do everything. He's like, 80% of patent attorneys are going away. I'm going to be one of the 20%. So he figured this guy's a genius. He knows how to use all the AI tools. So look, every single job, no matter what you do, myself, everybody should really spend the time getting well-versed and well-equipped with the Gemini and ChatGPT and Opus and all these tools.
You talk about being a talent person, you're, leading a network full of talent. What about on the reverse side? If you've been on TikTok, Instagram, you've seen, the firing videos, candidates or people getting fired or firing back, these group calls of 150 people that get on and just say, yeah, by the way, your computer is not going to be working in 3 seconds. Like, what can companies do to make this right? Like, I don't think there's a proper way to fire people. I'd prefer being fired that way versus having to come into the office, go to a separate floor, being told I have no transferable skills, and have to go get my lunch in the cafeteria and walk out, sometimes in front of a guard or a security guard. What are your thoughts about the way companies are letting go people, not just hiring them?
Yeah. I don't know. I'd certainly rather be fired over Zoom than in person as well. I mean, look, these are very tough decisions these companies are making, and it's on them to be as humane as possible. And, people deserve respect, and it's like the fact that I've had to do layoffs in my past, and when you do that, like, you got to own it, right? It's like we overhired or hired incorrectly. Like, take responsibility for yourself if you're the one making these decisions. And look, exogenous things in the economy cause these layoffs sometimes, right? But you can't just blame macro for everything. Everyone deserves respect, and anyone who's doing this in an inhumane way it's not necessary. You don't have to be inhumane.
I think there's opportunity now, even for Braintrust, right? If someone has to let go of somebody, they use Braintrust to hire them. Maybe they can provide them with a certain amount of tokens to get one-on-one mentorship or to be used for other applications within your ecosystem. I think is an interesting concept. Help companies both on the front end and the back end.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, we were talking about the layoffs earlier. Like, and I forgot to answer the question. Braintrust went from something like 150,000 talent members to 750,000 in like 9 months last year.
Wow.
And it's mostly driven by the layoffs. And, these people have some have found some solace and community and camaraderie on the Braintrust Professional Network, being able to help each other and coach each other and develop, a network that can, lead to another better job.
What are your thoughts? We're hearing, reports. I don't know how true they are, but a lot of publications are publishing that 1 in 5, employers are seeing candidates bring their family members, parents, to the actual job interview, not in the lobby, directly to the job interview. Are you hearing instances on this? Like, what are your thoughts about this? Are your clients talking about this? Maybe on some Slack channels internally with maybe several emojis?
This is the first I'm hearing that. What we do see, but remember, we're all remote, so we don't see any buildings. But what we do see, I see actually almost every day, is someone's kid running behind, and and like, remember that was like a big scandal. Like, if you're on TV or podcaster, like, your kid runs by, and like, I'm so glad that got turned upside down. Like, I love seeing people's kids. Like, we have our all hands every week, and it's like someone's baby or toddler will pop in. I have a little 2-year-old, and it's like, that's awesome. Corporate America has taken so much from talent through the smartphone. Now it's like, if you're awake, you better be answering an email, right? And look, I'm guilty of this. I am. I'm always on, right? And I expect some of my people to always be on as well. But can't you, in exchange for that, let people work from home when they want or where they want? We have half the employees we have are digital nomads, which that wasn't even a term 3 years ago, right? But these mostly younger people, like, they don't live anywhere, right? It's like, where are you this now? How cool, right?
He's like, oh man, why did this happen when I didn't have kids? And I think I see a lot of people, even with kids, that are just embracing it, and they're traveling the world, and I absolutely love that. We have about 5 minutes left unless you can go a little bit longer. But I want to talk about your serial entrepreneur. You talk about businesses hiring thousands of people. What are you looking for? Because we have a lot of people that are entrepreneurs on this call, business consultants. What are the things that you think are the decision makers? What are the deal breakers and the decision makers for you when you're like hey, I want to work with this company. I want to invest in this company. I want to advise for this company. Like, what are your thought processes around this, or maybe your ethos?
Sure. Yeah. And I unfortunately do have a hard stop at 10:30, so I'll try to make this brief. But so as an investor, I've been an investor in hundreds of companies. Directly, I'm an LP in probably 14 or 15 venture and hedge funds. Very active family office on the tech investing side. And I still do deals. I spend very like 1% of my time on this because I'm focused on Braintrust. But I will, spend time with a founder occasionally. And look, there's plenty of good ideas out there, right? Ideas are cheap. It's execution that matters. And taking a startup from 0 to 1, getting that first $1 million in ARR, we're about 100 now, trying to break to $1 billion. And God, is it hard. You need someone who's just, I'll misuse this word, but you'll understand what I mean. Just psychopathically obsessed with success. And you're looking for a founder that will do whatever it takes within the confines of the law. Of course, I've invested in people who have stepped out of those confines, and it doesn't end well. So keep it compliant and legal, people. But look, this is the hardest goddamn job there is, and you have to find someone. When you're investing your own money, you have to find someone who is just going to win at all costs and that is going to slavishly be dedicated. And I get asked, like, tell me about the ups and downs of the roller coaster. Like, it's all downs. You're living for like 10 cumulative minutes a year of satisfaction if you're lucky, and the rest of it is really tough. And so you got to believe in what you're doing, right? Like I'm so driven by our mission at Braintrust to level the playing field for global talent and make hiring way easier and more fair and less biased and faster for clients, because I've been on both sides. And so that's what keeps me, that's what gets me through all the BS you got to deal with as a founder.
And I think you being on both sides, I'm very similar, been on both sides of the table. You really do see like, oh, this is a really bad thing. Like, if this person just kind of did this and that person did this could be the best process. And by far, it's the worst process. Like, if buying a house and buying a car is going to be such, filled with so much friction, people still don't stop doing it, but you still want them to have a joyous experience, especially when they're only going to go through 4 or 5 of these sometimes within a 10 or 12-year period where they're looking for jobs. Talk to me a little bit about how do you keep from having shiny ball syndrome? Like, I know you left Doctors on Demand. Kind of looking back, you're like, hey, this is really blowing up right now with the pandemic. Maybe this is something I stick with versus, going into the recruitment field. How do you keep from like, maybe dabbling in different things, but keep your focus on, I don't want to go back to do that. I kind of left for a reason type of thing.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I'm still a shareholder in that company. So it can
upside.
That's a trick. Like plant lots of seeds and some of them will grow. Avoiding chasing shiny objects is an important part of being a good leader. You have to think critically from first principles about what's important, and we see a lot of shiny objects in crypto land, this stupid meme coin shit. It just drives me crazy, right? And if I hear any investor I'm an investor in, like, taking it seriously, it drives me nuts. Like, there might be something there derivative, but like trading the dog coins and stuff, like, you just got to be intellectually disciplined in your role. And I think that's still worth something.
But that's how people looked at Bitcoin too, right? So you almost have to like weigh it a little bit, because you're like, yeah, that's kind of how I got into crypto in the first place.
That's true.
Looking at something that people thought was a meme
some shiny
coin,
objects turn out to be, some shiny objects turn out to be digital gold for sure. But I think there's a big gap between Bitcoin and meme coins. But I take your point.
Adam, this has been, I don't know, I've been so excited to have this conversation. The chat was going wild on LinkedIn. I love your aspects. I love the way you're talking about this. I definitely want to I know this is your second time on the podcast. I definitely want to have you back in maybe a year from now or at the end of this year and see how things are going. Thank you so much for taking your time. Where can people reach out to you? If people are like excited, do you kind of jive on LinkedIn, Twitter? Where do you spend most of your time interacting?
Yeah, I'm on both LinkedIn and Twitter. Twitter's at Adam Jackson SF, Braintrust.com, obviously. And Stephen, thank you so much for having me on. You've built an incredible community yourself. That thread that we're on LinkedIn is very thoughtful and vibrant. And thanks for including me.
I appreciate it. And we'll include all your links into the show notes. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.